Be seated. We turn in the scriptures once again to the book of Mark. We're going to be reading from Mark 5. We'll be reading the first 20 verses of Mark 5. This is found on page 840 in your pew Bibles. Page 840 in your pew Bibles, Mark 5. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains. But he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and bruising himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For Jesus was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. And the spirits begged Jesus, saying, "Send us to the pigs. Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out, entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. They were afraid. Those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs, and they began to beg Jesus to depart from the region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed of demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends, tell them how much the Lord has done for you, how he has had mercy on you." And the man went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. We know already that Jesus has power over demons, don't we? So let's count the ways that we already know in Mark how Jesus has power over demons. Let's look at chapter 1, verse 12. The Spirit drove Jesus into the wilderness, and there Jesus bested Satan himself in spirit-to-spirit combat. Verse 25, first chapter. Jesus healed a man. Only one demon in that case. He healed him of demon possession. Flip over to chapter 3, verse 22. Jesus himself was accused of being a crazy demon-possessed man. It's a strange type of projection from the Pharisees and scribes who said, because we can't figure out what you're all about, you must be demon-possessed. They were wrong, of course. And Jesus gives an interesting parable that's going to describe what happens in this passage we read today. He talks about robbing a strong man. Now, do you remember about robbing the strong man? Generally in a story, when you have a robber, the robber is the bad guy. But in this case, the robber's the good guy. Jesus comes in and binds the strong man. Who's the strong man? Satan. Think about what happened here. All of what we've read before about Jesus and the demons is a warm-up for this chapter. In chapter 5, we get the worst case of demon possession that anybody has ever seen. And Jesus shows people that he is completely serious about robbing that strong man, Satan himself, because he proceeds to rob the devil of one man. And he does it by conquering thousands of demons that are in this one man. There is a sense to this. There was a famous Roman leader, you might know the one, who said, "I came, I saw, and I conquered." I don't know if they're reading Latin anymore, but it's one of those famous things that they do in Latin class. That's exactly what Jesus did here. There is a Roman coming and seeing and conquering that happens in this particular case where the demons are concerned. What a miserable place. So we set the scene a little bit. First of all, the disciples are probably a little bit tired, aren't they? Last week we talked about Jesus calming the storm. I doubt they got much sleep. Jesus got his sleep. But the disciples are exhausted. They've just come across a very treacherous passage which has been calmed by Jesus himself. They may not even know why they're going to this particular place. Jesus doesn't tell them. He doesn't say, "Oh, let's go see the demon-possessed man on the other side." He doesn't say that. Instead, he says, "We're going to go to the other side of the lake." And so they go. And the misery of this man in this place is really hard to exaggerate. So let's talk about the man. Well, he's living in a dead place. He's living among the tombs. He's living next to the dead. Is he really living himself? Well, he's strong enough. He's going around terrorizing everybody. I guess he's alive, but he's almost a bit of a zombie. If you saw him, you would have been terrified. He was cutting himself, or bruising himself, as our translation says. This is similar to what the pagan priests did on Mount Carmel. If you remember Elijah versus the pagans at Mount Carmel. The priests, 400 of them, going around cutting themselves in a sort of religious fervor for Baal. This man does it to himself. He's like Samson. He has the power to overcome every physical restraint you can put on him, except that Samson did it by the power of the Spirit of God. This man does it by the power of the spirit of Satan. He is the anti-Samson. He is Samson with everything gone wrong, where he is immensely strong and powerful, but he is also a great, miserable, evil man who haunts the tombs and haunts the town. And night and day among the tombs and the mountains, he was always crying out and bruising himself with stones. Can you imagine? Even seeing this fellow would have been a terror. Disciples of Jesus would have known right away that this man was out of his mind. As he comes running toward them, as soon as Jesus lands, blood dripping from open wounds perhaps, crazy eyes, crazy hair, powerful muscles. The demons use him as the demon body. The demons have no body of their own. This man does the demons' dirty work. He's a slave. He is a slave of the demons doing their bidding. And Satan's slavery is always miserable. We don't always see this misery, praise God, out in such a stark way. But you can see it in this man. The slavery of one who can't be restrained by anything is especially miserable. This man can't be put in irons for his own good. He can't be put in irons so he doesn't terrorize the people who are just trying to bury their dead in the tombs. He can't be put in irons so that people will not hear the incessant howling and carrying on that this man does. The things that restrain us as people from evil won't save us. The restraints that we have around us are laws and curses that follow naturally perhaps from evil that we might be tempted to do. They keep us from harm. They can't save us. But this man was not even bound by the law. He was not even bound by human tradition of any sort. He was wild. I suppose you could say he was free, but what sort of freedom was this? He was free to be a slave to the demons. Some people are enslaved by careful and crafty and really interesting sort of looking into nature sort of sins, perhaps. Some people are enslaved by obvious sins, but sin is slavery, and the devil brings slavery, even as he promises freedom. Verses 1 through 8, one thing I am going to say about them is that verses 1 through 8 happen all at the same time. It's difficult to write something down that happens as quickly as this. When you make a movie, what do you do when something happens that quickly? You put it in slow motion. So imagine this unfolding in slow motion. The disciples would have written this down after they had had time to process what just happened. What just happened in only a few seconds. Jesus comes, he lands, the man comes running. Jesus says, "Come out of him." And there's a short conversation. That's the end of that interaction. The battle is that swift. And I do mean there is a battle that happened here. I'll get into the reasons in a little bit. The action is very sudden. It's tempting sometimes to read the Bible sort of in a David Attenborough voice, where everything unfolds according to a very definite plan of the script. This was chaotic. This was happening extremely fast. The man ran and fell on his knees. At about the same time, or shortly before, Jesus says to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." One command. What does the man do? He is a man who is possessed of a demon. He comes running at Jesus and the disciples. If I had a bow and arrow in those days, I would have been very tempted to try to drop him on the spot because he was clearly up to no good. He comes running at Jesus. Jesus says to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Now notice one thing. Come out of the man. There is a man in there somewhere. You would have been tempted to think this was an animal, a zombie. Jesus knows there's a man. He says to the man, "Come out of him, you unclean spirit." And the spirit obeys. How do we know this? Because the man immediately drops and worships God. What an interesting thing to have happen. Would you have expected this? The madman comes running. He drops and worships. What a turn of events. Completely unexpected if you are the disciples. And yet Jesus has this completely in control. This is a chaotic, quickly unfolding scene that Jesus turns on a dime with a word. Come out of him. And the demons obey. It's clear that the man is worshiping, by the way. There's a word that's used, proskuneo. It means to greet with a kiss, except it's more than that because this is the greeting with the kiss that happens when you are worshiping a god. The man worships God. There are people in the Greek and Roman literature at the time who are a little upset when people start giving the sign, this proskuneo, and we don't know what the sign looked like. Maybe it's a genuflection dropping on your knees, maybe it's a blown kiss, something like that. They're giving it to people who call themselves gods, namely the leaders in the place. And so there was a terror among the pagans even of giving this particular sign to anything except a true God. And this man brings this worship to a true God, Jesus himself, the Most High God. And in fact, the demons and the man are agreed on this one thing, that Jesus is the Most High God in front of them. The man shows it by dropping to his knees, by giving this sign with his body, which for once in his life, he is in control of. Imagine that. This is a man who has not been in control of where he went or what he did, what he thought. He's been stark, raving mad with the demonic possession. But here he is able to worship Jesus. And this is a true worship. And Jesus commands the demons to come out of him so that this can happen. They do. They come out of him. The crazy man hails Jesus as God, only he is no longer the crazy man. In an instant, he is healed. And even the demons show reverence in their own way. Do not torture us. Jesus stands his ground, and the battle is very short. Jesus sets the man free. And then we get a little bigger picture of what's going on behind the scenes. Sometimes in the Bible, we get a little picture of the larger reality that is around us, and I think it's fortunate that we don't know more of it because it would terrify us. Think of Job. Satan comes in and says, yeah, this man Job, the only reason he listens to you is he's rich. God says, watch this. In this case, we see a little bit behind the scenes because Jesus asks the name of the demons. And he says to them, what is your name? And the reply is chilling. Absolutely chilling. We are many. My name is Legion. Consider the horror of that. Legion. Well, people at this time knew what a legion was. Hopefully we have a little sense of it. A legion is thousands of men. A legion is a whole detachment of an army. We still divide armies in similar ways today. But think of 6,000 to 12,000 men in a legion. It's enough to control an entire region. And in fact, there was a legion in this area. We know this because pottery has been dug up that is marked LXF. Stands for Legio Dicensis 10. That's the X. You know about your Roman numerals, right? Fretensis. That refers to a battle that was fought years before this. It's founded by Augustus Caesar. Heard that name? Oh, yes. And it had a presence in that region that was called Decapolis because of the habit that the Jews had of rebelling. And so they always kept an army detachment there. Now, here's the funny thing about this. This legion had some interesting symbols along with it, this Legio Ex Fretensis. Its symbol was a boar. A boar is a pig. A boar is just a male pig, right? But nonetheless, there is a pig on everything that you find that has Legio Ex Fretensis on it. They put a little pig, picture of pig on it. Their god, their pagan god that they sacrificed to was Neptune. Now remember for a moment where Jesus came from coming here. Who had he conquered on the way to getting to this place? Arguably Neptune. The wind and the waves obey him. That sounds like Jesus conquered Neptune to me. And the boar. Well, we're getting there, aren't we? The legion may be in mind when Jesus lands by boat. I would like you to think of this as a one-man amphibious invasion. You know what an amphibious invasion is? It's when you start on a boat and you end on the land, and it's very difficult. Think D-Day or island hopping in World War II. Jesus does this as one man. His disciples are just there to witness it. And as one man landing from a boat, having conquered the sea itself, Jesus conquers a legion of demons, which is then sent into a bunch of pigs, think of the boar, which then drown themselves in the sea. Now, I do not know the answer that many of you are probably wondering. Why do the demons have to go into pigs? I don't know the answer to that. Here's my suspicion, though. Psalm 35 has a very interesting line in it. This is verse 8. Let the unexpected meet my enemy. Let my enemy be caught in the snare which he has spread for other feet, and fall into utter ruin there. My suspicion is that the demons thought they had it made. We'll just go to the pigs. When we feel like it, we'll come out and we will haunt other people. Because after all, this is our little region and we control it. That's what Satan tells them. But Jesus knows, once they're in the pigs are terrified, go stark raving mad, just like the man himself did, and run themselves into the lake, the Sea of Galilee. So my suspicion is that the demons thought they were clever and got caught by their own cleverness. In any case, they are disposed of. And they go into the sea where they drown. And there's no sign that the demons come back. When Jesus evicts a demon, they do not come back into the person. They do not go anywhere else. They are permanently sent on leave. This one-man amphibious invasion that Jesus put together conquers a legion. The legion then goes to the pigs. The legion is destroyed in the sea. Think of the abyss, perhaps. Jesus then departs by boat. The story begins and ends with a boat. The sea itself is used to dispose of the demons in the pigs. The victory over Neptune is complete. And Jesus shows his complete control over what is in nature and what is in the spiritual realm, which we know exists, and yet we know very little of because we are in this world right now. Now this legion, by the way, this legion, Legio Exfratensis, the LXF, is exactly the same legion that Vespasian will use some years in the future to destroy Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. It also destroys Bar Kokhba. It was garrisoned near Decapolis. They needed to be fed. What were 2,000 pigs doing near the tombs, near Decapolis? This was an industrial pig farming operation. And it's likely that these pigs would have fed the pagan soldiers themselves, the Romans. A large number of pigs, very valuable, all disappear. But it's a high value on a dirty sort of crop. This crop is only used, these pigs are only used by people who worship the pagan gods and sacrifice to them. The pigs were unclean. The demons were unclean. The pigs go running into the sea. Now, if these pigs were food for an army, you can imagine that the people of the place, especially the pig herders, would be pretty alarmed. Losing that much livestock, seeing the command over the pagan gods disappear all in an instant, was not a welcome thing. And this is a story of two reactions in some ways. You have the reaction of the people who are around tending the pigs in the towns, and you have the reaction of the man himself who was healed of demon possession. The man who is out of his mind becomes a man who is sane and in his true mind. The men who are sacrificing to idols, at least as far as this story is concerned, continue to sacrifice to idols. It's not really a story about the disposal of pigs or about the people who don't listen, though. Let's refocus on the man who is now in his right mind. What does he do? He begs Jesus to be allowed to come with him. Here's the man who's running down wild, is hit with the words of Jesus. The words of Jesus cause the demons to come out, and now he knows who his true master is. A man who is in his right mind follows Jesus. And you'd think Jesus would welcome him into the boat. Sure, come along with me. We have lots of things to do. But no, this is one of the first times that Jesus sends out a missionary. And what a missionary it is. a man who is redeemed from a fate worse than death, a man who is redeemed from a life of serving demons, then serves Jesus. Jesus has other plans. He tells him to go to the cities of Decapolis and tell what has happened to him. And he does. He does do this. You know, we don't hear more about this man in scriptures, but we know from history that this area did have many churches. And by the time of the Council of Nicaea, Decapolis sends representatives which remember this man. And what an experience it would be to be in church with this man, to hear his testimony, which has to be one of the most amazing testimonies of anybody that Jesus has ever saved. Want to hear a crazy story? He probably didn't have to tell it too often because people already knew it. The entire region knows. By the time this is done, the pig herders and the people of the town, as well as the man himself, are going to be telling this story. Some with horror. Can you believe what just happened? Some with joy. This man goes and he tells the joy of knowing Jesus and being in his right mind and clothing himself and healing from his wounds and working for a living in an honest way. This man goes to live an ordinary life after this, but it's an ordinary life that's transformed by the power of Jesus. And the entire region knew about this. The entire region knew about 2,000 rotting pig carcasses that were in the lake. The entire region knew of the way that a man who was absolutely out of his mind crazy was now serving the Most High God. Consider just how different a story this is, by the way. What ordinarily happens when you have an enemy that rushes at a powerful army and they clash? The enemy is usually killed, correct? Well, in this case, the enemy is killed, but the enemy is not the man who is there. The enemy are the demons. The demons are disposed of, but the man is preserved. How is such a thing possible? Jesus, by the way, would have been within his natural right to kill this crazy man that came rushing at him. But he doesn't. He rescues him. You know, we look down on people who don't follow society's rules. And that's just from a human standpoint, right? What must God think of all the people who refuse to live by his laws? The rebellion that human beings have been at for thousands of years is literally crazy. And yes, I am referring to every person who rebels against God as being like this man who is out of his mind among the tombs. We have a death wish if we go against God. We are the living dead. This rebellion that we take on ourselves is literally crazy. Now, you may not have met demon-possessed people, but I guarantee you've met plenty of people who act in completely crazy ways, who decide that their way is the best way, that God has nothing to teach them. In fact, you may know that in your very own soul, this is true of you without Jesus. And the people of this land that Jesus visits around Decapolis are a little like this too. They see Jesus work a great miracle, and all they can see is leave. Wouldn't those who deal with demons like those demons want those demons to leave and get out of the country? You know, it's really strange what can be normal to human beings. It's really strange that we can take on things that are just terrible. And we can say, it's becoming normal to me. I'm used to it. So therefore I want it still more. And the townspeople are accustomed to paganism, to tombs, to pigs, to demon possession, the dirty things and the evil things. And Jesus could have stayed in Decapolis, but he left. He came, he saw, and he conquered. But he didn't leave completely. He left a messenger and an emissary for himself. He left the man that he healed. The very worst demon possession that was possible, thousands of demons in one man. Jesus left him to be the one to tell those who were in this country what it was to follow him. The hero of this story is obviously Jesus. But there's a second man that we should think of, which is the possessed man himself. Jesus doesn't leave him in misery. He invites him to tell the amazing things. It's today, let's think about how we might address the crazy people of the world today. Jesus has sent us to be in the world. Our world is constantly inventing new things that are not true and then insisting that people believe them. Is this not true? Let me tell you one of my favorites. This is my favorite falsehood because it encapsulates so many falsehoods all at once. It was written in 1992 by Justice Kennedy. You may know this. He says, and he's very wrong, at the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence and meaning of the universe and of the mystery of human life. Sounds good. Many people believe it. But this is a promise of freedom which disguises a way to slavery. And just as we have the story of Faustus, who was promised talent and riches if only he sold his soul to the devil, we humans are perfectly capable of serving evil by wishing to be free of the constraint of God. And we as a people may not be demon-possessed, but so many people act as if they are. They follow lies rather than truth. So I will say to you today, follow Jesus. And if you don't know Jesus, you may not know things as they are. I'll tell you a brief story about that illustrates the fine line sometimes between craziness, worship of Jesus, and worship of the world. This is one of my favorite stories from teaching. This was 20 years ago when I was teaching at a fancy school that cost a lot of money to go to. And we decided to have a day of service, a good step for a bunch of rich children. A day of service. So I got a group together with another teacher. We went to the Whosoever Gospel Mission. A good place to go. It's a place where they provide discipline and housing for men who are recovering from addictions of all sorts. And they've been very successful. If you ever want to get to know a current hero of the faith, get to know Bob Emberger. But at Whosoever Gospel Mission, first of all, on the way, in the van on the way there, I said to the kids who were with me, so this whosoever, do you guys know where that word whosoever comes from? And they thought a bit and said, well, it sounds kind of religious to me. Yeah, it's religious. That's true. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him. That sounds kind of familiar. Well, maybe you've seen the people at football games holding up the sign, John 3:16. Oh, yeah. Okay. So we got there and we worked, and at that time they had a ministry where they collected used clothing, sorted it, threw a lot away, and sold the rest of it in their thrift store. And so we worked with a fellow who was sorting clothing. And while we worked, there was a fellow who was there sharing the gospel to all of us. He said, let me tell you what Jesus has done for me. Then at a certain point, he saw these boys I was with kind of looking at each other like, we don't quite know what's going on here. Can you help us out, teacher? I was like, man, I'm loving this, guys. You just don't know how much I'm loving this. And he stopped and he saw their reactions. And he said, you all think I'm crazy, right? And they nodded their heads. We think you're crazy. But I'm telling you right now that Jesus means I'm more in my right mind than most of the people that listen to me. And he was right. And boy, did that get us in an interesting conversation on the way home. I don't know that anybody was saved that day. But I think those boys remember that. I certainly remember it. It was a sermon that spoke directly to my heart and reminded me that a person that has come out of a crazy life that follows Jesus will tell a testimony that is very difficult to forget. And we might look at him and say, "You're crazy." But he's going to look right back and say, "You know what? I'm not the crazy one in this conversation. If you're not following Jesus, you truly are crazy." So I will say, follow Jesus. He will work. You will be in your right mind. Jesus conquers demons. He conquers death. He conquers ruinous ideas. He sets us on the right path. Amen.